Daenys Targaryen, who is popularly referred to as Daenys the Dreamer, was the daughter of Aegon, a nobleman from the Valyrian freehold. When she was a young woman, she received a vision in a dream which showed the destruction of Valyria by fire. She told her parents about this dream, and her father believed it to be a true prediction of what is to come, in which he packed up their belongings, bringing Daenys and her family along with him to Dragonstone, an island in the Narrow Sea located near Westeros. With them, they took 5 dragons, one of whom was Balerion, and when the doom of Valyria finally happened 12 years after her prediction, House Targaryen was the only family of dragon riders that had survived. Daenys was eventually married to her brother, Daemon, who became the Lord of Dragonstone after their father's passing. Here, they lived out the rest of their lives ruling Dragonstone, and they eventually had 2 children, known as Aegon and Aelena Targaryen. Once Daenys and her brother passed away, her 2 children became the rulers of Dragonstone, as they also married and would have children of their own. Aegon Targaryen I, who is widely known as Aegon the Conqueror, was the son of Aerion Targaryen and Daenys' great-great-great-grandson. Aegon was born on Dragonstone, and he had 2 sisters, one who was older and named Visenya, and another who was younger known as Rhaenys. He eventually married Visenya, which was believed to be out of duty, so he could secure his succession of being Lord of Dragonstone, but he also married Rhaenys out of love. Aegon started to gain an interest in Westeros after previously visiting it, believing it should be 1 realm instead of 7. After a conflict with the Storm King of Westeros, Aegon decided it was time for him to become the King of Westeros, notifying all the lords of what is to come. The Targaryen army, which included Aegon and his dragon Balerion, as well as the other dragons the Targaryens had, started overthrowing many houses one by one, and after some tried fighting back and others surrendered, the Targaryens were eventually successful in their invasion, and Aegon displayed the 3-headed dragon symbol of House Targaryen for the very first time. Aegon chose to date the beginning of his reign when the High Septon anointed him in Oldtown, declaring Aegon to be the King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. Rather than ruling in Oldtown or Dragonstone, Aegon chose to make King's Landing his seat, which was a new settlement growing around the Aegon Fort. He took the swords of his defeated enemies, forging them into the Iron Throne, and he started the Small Council, making Lord Orys Baratheon, who is Aegon's rumored bastard half-brother, his first Hand of the King. Aegon treated the defeated lords with respect and allowed each region to retain its own laws and customs, and he would even often travel the realm with 6 maesters, who educated him on each region's local customs and history. Eventually, Aegon turned his attention back onto Dorne, the only region that remained unconquered, and after many years of failed negotiations, Aegon decided it was time to take it by force. Within the first 9 years of this war, Orys was captured and mutilated, being sent back home lacking his sword hand, and Aegon was intent on revenge, sending his dragons to burn their castles. This is where Rhaenys, alongside her dragon Meraxes, were shot out of the sky, and Aegon became wrathful from this event. 3 years after Rhaenys' death, the attempted invasion of Dorne was called to an end after he received a visit from Princess Daria Martell. He kept good relations with her over the next years, and he even visited Dorne to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of peace with them. The next 24 years of Aegon's reign were peaceful, where he continued to build his capital at King's Landing and tried keeping good relations with the lords of each region in the faith of the 7. Before Rhaenys' death, he had 1 child with her, known as Aenys, and he also eventually had another son with Visenya, going by the name Maegor. Aegon later died from a stroke at the age of 63, and although his reign was, for the most part, peaceful, there were still many lords who wanted to go back to the things were before the Targaryen rule, which created many conflicts for his son Aenys when he took the throne. Maegor Targaryen I, popularly known as Maegor the Cruel, was the 3rd Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne, behind his brother Aenys, who had only ruled for 5 years. He had much success in his military accomplishments, and he was knighted by his father at the age of 16. Around this time, he was also married to the High Septon's daughter, Lady Cerys Hightower. After Aegon's death, his brother presented Maegor with his father's Valyrian steel sword, Blackfyre, proclaiming they will rule together. Although this was a very nice gesture from Aenys, it seemed to not matter much to Maegor, as after Aenys' death, Maegor claimed the throne for himself, even though Aenys had multiple sons, the oldest of which was supposed to be the next in the line of succession. Grand Maester Gawyn spoke out about this, and Maegor had him beheaded, which resulted in no one else challenging Maegor's claim to the throne. It was also around this time that he had taken another wife, Lady Alis Haraway, and this marriage angered many. During a battle shortly after Maegor became king, he took a blow to the head, where he went into a deep coma. After 30 days, he awoke from this coma, mounting his dragon Balerion, and continuing to fight in battle. Following his victories, he took Tiana of the Tower as his 3rd wife. Grand Maester Myros objected to it, and Maegor had him beheaded. Dozens of Septons turned Maegor down to perform his wedding ceremony, in which he executed all of them as well. Maegor continued the construction of the Red Keep, and he made his new wife's father, Lord Lucas Haraway, the new Hand of the King. Maegor eventually reconciled with his first wife, Queen Cerys, and she returned with him to King's Landing. Later that year, Prince Aegon, Aenys' first son, announced his claim to the Iron Throne, marching his army of 15,000 men to King's Landing. Maegor killed Aegon and his dragon, ending Aegon's rebellion, and he was now known as a kinslayer throughout the realm. His second wife, Alis, announced announced she was pregnant, and 3 months later gave birth to a monstrosity. Maegor was convinced the child could not be his, where he was in the belief that she must have had an affair. Maegor had everyone involved in the birth executed, and he dragged Alis from her bed, giving her to Queen Tiana for torture. Every Haraway at King's Landing, including the Hand of the King, were killed, with Alicent's death being the worst of them all. Maegor departed to Lord Haraway's town, killing every single person, and House Haraway became extinct. Eventually, the Red Keep's construction was completed, and Maegor had a celebration for those who had taken part in building it. He eventually had all of them put to death to protect the secrets of the castle. His first wife, Cerys, fell ill and died, and after he still had no heirs, he seeked out not only a fourth wife, but also a fifth and sixth to triple his chances of getting a son. Two of his wives became pregnant, with the first child being born legless and armless, and she died not much long after. After rumors started circulating that Maegor was cursed, Queen Tiana confessed that she had poisoned the child and his wife, in which she was tortured and executed by Maegor himself. His next wife gave birth, but this child was born eyeless and had small wings. Maegor's nephew, Jaehaerys, put forth a claim to the throne, and when few came to support Maegor after he had called for his banners, he was found dead on the Iron Throne, impaled by one of the swords on it. Some say he was killed, others say he did it to himself, but there are no real answers as to what happened to Maegor the Cruel. Jaehaerys Targaryen I, also known as Jaehaerys the Wise, was the fourth child of King Aenys and Queen Alyssa. Following Maegor's mysterious death, Jaehaerys arrived in King's Landing, and his mother served as Queen Regent during the first 2 years of his reign, as he was only 14 years old. Jaehaerys pardoned the lords and knights who had served Maegor, restoring their lands and titles to them. Whenever it came to marriage, it was decided by a small council that he could not marry his sister, Alicent, as the faith previously had issues with incestuous marriages. After Jaehaerys found out that his sister was to be wedded to Sir Oren Baratheon, he acted quickly, marrying her instead. This was kept a secret for quite some time, and they both stayed together on Dragonstone, where he decided he didn't want to be weak like his father, and trained day in and day out. Eventually, word of his marriage started to spread around Westeros. When he turned 16, he returned to King's Landing, making many changes to his small council, as he was now the new king of Westeros. It was also around this time that Alicent announced that she was pregnant, in which they had their first child. Jaehaerys started visiting many lords, great and small, determined to be seen in as many places as possible. Over the next few years, Jaehaerys and Alicent would continue to have more and more children together, with 13 in total, and although they had many heirs, none of them would become king, as he outlived pretty much all of them. Jaehaerys was the longest reigning Targaryen monarch, sitting on the throne for 55 years. Viserys Targaryen I, who many refer to as Viserys the Peaceful, was the fifth king to sit on the Iron Throne behind his grandfather Jaehaerys. Baelon Targaryen, who was his father, was Jaehaerys' heir, but he passed away before Jaehaerys did, making Viserys the next in the royal line of succession. During Viserys' time as king, House Targaryen was at its most powerful, having the most members and dragons since the doom of Valyria. Viserys was married to Aemma Arryn, and they had two children, a son who died in infancy, and a daughter, Princess Rhaenyra. Viserys' younger brother, Prince Daemon, considered himself to be his brother's heir. Viserys loved his brother, but he did not want Daemon to ever become king, and he was hopeful that his wife would give him a son. Unfortunately, she would later die while in labor, birthing the king's son and heir, but he passed away a day later. Eventually, Viserys was remarried to Alicent Hightower in the hopes that he would be able to create a rightful heir. Together, they had 4 children, 3 of which were sons, known as Aegon, Aemon, and Daeron, as well as a daughter who goes by Helena. As Viserys got older, his disease, leprosy, continued to get worse, in which it ate at his eyes, nose, and nerves. Before dying from this disease, he informed his first daughter, Rhaenyra, that he wanted her to be the heir to the Iron Throne, instead of his firstborn son, Aegon. In his final moments, he speaks to his wife in a disillusioned state, where he believes he is speaking to Rhaenyra, and he talks to her about Aegon the Conqueror's story. Alicent mistakes this for Viserys wishing to see their son, Aegon, on the throne, and she promises him that this will happen. Viserys eventually dies, and his son, Aegon, becomes the king of Westeros, with Rhaenyra rebelling against him, knowing she was made the rightful heir. Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, who is recognized as the queen who never was the daughter of Aemon Targaryen, one of Jaehaerys' sons. Before Viserys was eventually picked to become king, it was not clear who the rightful heir was, as Rhaenys' father was 2 years older than Viserys', which could have technically made her next in the line of succession. With that being said, years before all of that, Rhaenys married Lord Corlys Velaryon at the age of 16, and even before that, she claimed the dragon Meleys as her own. A couple of years after marrying Corlys, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Lyanna, and 2 years later, she gave birth to a son known as Laenor. Her 2 children both eventually died some years later, where Lyanna passed away giving childbirth, and later that year, Laenor was killed while attending a fair. Rhaenys, now serving Princess Rhaenyra during her rebellion, chose to go with her dragon to protect the castle of Rock's Rest, as Sir Criston Cole was launching an attack to take it over. Unfortunately, this attack was just a ploy, as Aemon and Aegon made their appearances on their dragons, killing Rhaenys in an epic yet devastating fight. I am only caught up to the show, but I can tell this will have long-lasting effects of what is to come with Rhaenyra's rebellion. Aegon Targaryen IV, known as Aegon the Unworthy, I was the 11th Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne, and is considered by many to be one of the worst Targaryen kings. He is the great-grandson of King Viserys, and at around the age of 10 years old, his mother had passed away. At about 18, he was married to his sister, Princess Aerys, and their marriage was not a happy one. His sister liked her brother Aemon more, but she went through with the marriage anyways. During their bedding on their wedding night, she would not stop crying, but they ended up having a child known as Daeron. Eventually, Aegon ended up having an affair with his cousin, Daena, and she gave birth to a bastard known as Daemon. At this time, this was not the first bastard Aegon had, as he already had 2 others from different women. Eventually, Aegon became king, as some believe he poisoned his father to hasten his inheritance of the Iron Throne. Aegon was a very corrupt ruler, and he had many bastards over his reign, with as many as 9 different women. He filed his court with those who could amuse him, rather than those who were wise and honest, and the women at court would let him pursue them in whatever way he wanted. At some point, Aegon had accused his sister wife of adultery with their brother, in which Aegon claimed that Daeron is not his child, but instead was Aemon's. There was a trial by combat to settle this matter, where Aemon was able to successfully defend himself, but because this happened in the first place, the rumors still spread about. Over the years, Aegon indulged more and more in his pleasures, where he eventually became extremely obese, to the point that his legs could barely support his own weight. On his deathbed, he legitimized all of his bastard children, which resulted in a huge issue for the line of succession, as Daemon, rumored to be Aegon's favorite child despite being a bastard, declared himself the rightful heir, which tore the Seven Kingdoms into an all-out civil war. Daemon Blackfyre I, the bastard son of Aegon IV, took on the name Blackfyre, naming himself after the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Targaryen, which his father had previously given to him. Although Aegon's legitimate son, Daeron, was 11 years older than Daemon, because Aegon made the accusations he did against his wife, Daemon was able to run with that and gathered support from multiple noble houses. With that being said, Daeron was still made king, where he attempted to correct his father's wrongdoings. Daemon eventually launched the Blackfyre Rebellion, which divided the Seven Kingdoms, and half of the realm ended up declaring for him. Not even a year into this rebellion, Daemon was killed in battle, as he charged the vanguard, fighting like a warrior. He dueled Sir Gawain, with both men using their Valyrian steel swords, and the duel apparently lasted nearly an hour. Daemon eventually won this duel, but unfortunately for him, arrows rained down on him from his half-brother, Brynden Rivers, and also his men who supported King Daeron. This marked the end of the first Blackfyre Rebellion, but over the next 5 generations, more came about, and it all started because of this man, Daemon Blackfyre. Daeron Targaryen II, popularly known as Daeron the Good, was the 12th Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne behind his father, Aegon. Before becoming king, he was married to Princess Maria Martell, and some years later, he took on being the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Unlike his father, Daeron did many great things, and like I mentioned before, spent a good chunk of his time making right by his father's wrongdoings. He also treated his father's bastards honorably, and he even gave all of them money and land. Daeron began negotiations with Meryn Martell, Prince of Dorne, to hopefully unite Dorne and the Seven Kingdoms. After 2 years, they reached an agreement, and Meryn was married to Daeron's sister, Princess Daenerys. 1 year later, the Prince of Dorne swore an oath of fealty before the Iron Throne. Daeron was more of a scholar than a warrior, but his sons were very skilled at arms. After the first Blackfyre Rebellion, Daeron took lands, castles, and hostages from the lords who fought for House Blackfyre as punishment. With that being said, the rest of Daeron's reign was peaceful. Baelor, who was Daeron's eldest son, became Hand of the King during the later portion of his reign. Unfortunately, Baelor was accidentally slain by Maegor, who was Daeron's youngest son, during a trial of 7. 1 year later, Daeron passed away, in which his son Aerys became the next king, and since he never had a proper heir, his younger brother, Maegor, became the king after him. Daeron reigned for 25 years, and most of them were peaceful, good ones. Aemon Targaryen, who later became Maester Aemon of the Night's Watch, was the 3rd son of King Maegor and the grandson of Daeron. As a child, Aemon was a bookish boy, and he and his younger brother, Prince Aegon, would sometimes pretend that their dragon eggs would hatch so they could become dragon riders. Aemon gave Aegon the nickname of Egg, and they had many fond memories together. I would love to specifically talk about Egg in this video, as I know he is a very great character in this franchise, and he also later becomes king, but I do not want to spoil myself for the upcoming A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms show. Anyways, around the age of 10 years old, Aemon was sent by his father to the Citadel, where he became a maester, finishing his studies at the age of 19. He eventually served as a maester at Dragonstone under his eldest brother, Prince Daeron, who unfortunately passed away. Sometime later, his father had died, and Aegon was considered by some lords as not worthy to take on the Iron Throne, so they suggested Aemon could be released from his sworn vows to succeed his late father. Aemon refused and chose to join the Night's Watch out of fear that he might be used in a plot to usurp his brother, who was now King Aegon V. Over the years, Aemon claimed to have his vows to the Night's Watch tested on numerous occasions, with the last one being the hardest to overcome, when he learned about the destruction of House Targaryen during Robert's Rebellion. With that being said, he stayed true to his vows, and served the remaining years he had at the Night's Watch loyally. King Aerys Targaryen II, who is notoriously known as the Mad King, was the 17th and last member of the Targaryen dynasty to sit on the Iron Throne. He was the grandson of Aegon V, born to King Jaehaerys II. During his youth, Aerys befriended a young Tywin Lannister while meeting him at court. While Aerys was a teenager, he was married to his sister Rhaella, and they later had their first son and heir, who is known as Prince Rhaegar. At the age of 16, Aerys was made into a knight, choosing to be dubbed by his friend Tywin. Jaehaerys passed away not long after, in which Aerys was made the king of Westeros. One of the first things he did was replacing all the older prominent officials at court with younger men, including his friend Tywin. He eventually named Tywin his first Hand of the King. Aerys declared upon his coronation that he wishes to become the greatest king in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. He was very ambitious towards the beginning of his reign, although almost everything he wanted to accomplish never actually happened. With that being said, the Seven Kingdoms prospered during these years, mostly thanks to Tywin, but many lords and commoners loved and respected Aerys. Eventually, he became spiteful of the power of others, especially that of Tywin. He grew more and more paranoid over time, and during the defiance of Duskendale, Aerys was imprisoned and tormented for 6 months. He was eventually rescued by Sir Barristan Selmy, but this imprisonment drove him even more into madness. Aerys later knighted Jaime Lannister and admitted him to the Kingsguard not out of honor, but instead to spite Tywin. Aerys grew brutal and increasingly fascinated with fire, especially wildfire. He started using it to burn alleged traitors alive, rather than hanging or beheading them. Aerys' son, Rhaegar, disappeared with Lyanna Stark, where many believed he had kidnapped her, and her father and brother were outraged. Aerys, instead of hearing them out, decided to burn them alive by using wildfire, and he then ordered Jon Arryn to send him the head of Lyanna's other brother, Eddard, who is now the Lord of Winterfell. Of course, this is where Robert's Rebellion took place, and slowly but surely, Aerys started losing the war. He sent his sister-wife, who was newly pregnant with their daughter, Daenerys, as well as their son, Viserys, to Dragonstone for their own safety. As Robert's army approached King's Landing, Aerys demanded Jaime to kill his father, Tywin, and gave the order to ignite the wildfire that was beneath the entire city. Aerys believed he would not die in the fire, but instead be transformed into a dragon. To prevent the wildfire plot from being carried out, Jaime killed the Mad King, now being known as the Kingslayer. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, the firstborn son of the Mad King, was a very smart and beloved individual. He became a knight at the age of 17 and grew into a skilled and capable fighter. With that being said, he was not very enthusiastic about fighting. Many were eagerly waiting for his father to pass away, so Rhaegar could become the next king of Westeros, as he was just that adored. As he grew older and his father became more insane, Rhaegar could not bring himself to turn against his own father. He believed the small council could keep the realm together until his father passed away, but unfortunately, that is not what happened. Tywin wanted to arrange a marriage between his daughter, Cersei, and Rhaegar, but Aerys did not allow it, and instead, Rhaegar was to be wedded to Princess Elia Martell. They had a happy marriage, and she birthed a son named Aegon and a daughter named Rhaenys. During a tournament at Harrenhal, Rhaegar was the champion and placed his flowers not in his wife's lap, but instead Lyanna Stark's. A year later, Rhaegar and Lyanna ran off together, where they both fell in love with one another, and they arranged a secret marriage. After some time passed, Rhaegar returned to King's Landing to lead the Crown's army. He met Robert Baratheon on the battlefield, resulting in an epic duel that went on for hours, and Robert killed Rhaegar with a blow from his warhammer, caving in Rhaegar's breastplate. After this battle, the Targaryen army collapsed, and the rebels were victorious. Prince Viserys Targaryen, who is sometimes referred to as the Last Dragon and the Beggar King, is the second oldest son of the Mad King behind Rhaegar, and the heir to the Iron Throne after Rhaegar's death. Viserys was only a young boy at the time of Robert's Rebellion, and his mother Rhaella sheltered him from Aerys' madness as much as she could. After arriving at Dragonstone, they received news of Aerys' death and also the death of all of his children. Viserys was technically declared king, but that did not matter now. 9 months after fleeing King's Landing, Rhaella died while giving birth to Daenerys. Stannis Baratheon's fleet was almost at Dragonstone, and many of the garrison there were ready to turn Viserys and his sister over to them, but some men who were loyal to the Targaryens, one of whom was named Sir Willem Darry, smuggled the children to Braavos, ensuring their safety. They lived in Braavos with Willem for quite some time, and there was eventually a secret marriage pact with Prince Oberyn Martell, agreeing for Viserys to take Princess Arianne Martell as his bride in exchange for Dorne to support his claim to the throne. Viserys was never made aware of this pact, as Willem thought he wasn't at an age yet to hear about it, but he soon fell ill and eventually died, so Viserys never found out about this information. He and his sister became impoverished and wandered the free cities, never staying long at one location. His relationship with Daenerys was initially warm, but he later grew resentment towards her for the death of their mother and began treating her abusively. In Pentos, they met Illyrio Mopatis, and he helped arrange a marriage between Daenerys and Khal Drogo, which Viserys had planned. Eventually, Viserys dies due to his cocky demeanor at the hands of Khal Drogo. Daenerys Targaryen, who is known by many names, one of which is the Mother of Dragons, was initially very timid and obedient in her youth. After the marriage to Khal Drogo, she gained a lot of confidence, and that was especially the case towards the end of her brother's life, who was also her abuser. After Viserys is killed, Daenerys believes her family's throne should be conquered for her unborn son, and tries to persuade Drogo to invade the Seven Kingdoms. Drogo is eventually injured and is on the brink of death, so Daenerys begs a witch to use her blood magic to heal him. The witch does this, not informing her what it will do to him and her child, and he comes back basically soulless, as well as her child now being born malformed, which was the price that she had to pay. Angered by this, Daenerys burns her alive with Drogo's corpse, as well as stepping into the fire herself, and the next morning, Daenerys is unharmed with the eggs hatched, meaning these are the only dragons now alive in the world since all of them died off many years ago. Daenerys names her dragons Viserion after her brother Viserys, Rhaegal after her brother Rhaegar, and Drogon after her late husband Drogo. Daenerys, with the help of others, is able to raise an impressive army, gather ships for her conquest to Westeros, and she now has 3 fully grown dragons. In the show, she meets Jon Snow, who she falls in love with, and after defeating the Night King, they set out to take King's Landing. Daenerys for some reason goes crazy, killing thousands of innocents with her dragon, and then she becomes queen. Jon Snow then kills her dragon Drogon gets pissed off and burns the Iron Throne. Then he carries Daenerys' body with his claws, flying off into the distance, never to be seen again. Wow, what a great way to end a character's story. Jon Snow, although not recognized in the books as a Targaryen, at least yet, is one in the show, and he was born as Aegon Targaryen, with his parents being Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar, which is kind of weird because Rhaegar already had a child with Elia Martell named Aegon, but yeah, I guess that makes sense. Anyways, instead of going over information you already know about Jon from the show, I'm going to talk about some differences that the show had compared to how he was in the books from the research I have done. As I'm sure most of you are like me and aren't book readers, in the books, Jon is apparently darker, but he's also more intelligent in many ways that the adaptation just doesn't showcase. He also has way more of a sense of humor and is quite sassy in the books. He lies and manipulates if he has to, and even desires to be the Lord of Winterfell, which is not like him at all in the show. In the books, he also takes child hostages at some point and is just more ruthless overall. He is also a skin changer, like Bran is in the show. He also isn't anywhere near as good at sword fighting in the books as he is in the show. Overall, Jon is a lot more stoic in the TV series, whereas in the books you are able to learn a lot more about his personal desires. He wants power, recognition, and he's overall just more political. Anyways, in the TV series, he is now the last surviving Targaryen, and it is to be assumed that the Targaryen bloodline dies off with him. Unless he has a child in the future, and maybe one day we'll find out about this if the show ever gets a sequel. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below your thoughts and who your favorite member of House Targaryen is. Apologies for not covering characters like Alicent's children, or Rhaenyra and her children, as well as Egg, as I just don't want to spoil myself for what happens in the rest of House of the Dragon, and also the upcoming A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms show. Anyways, thank you again, and goodbye.